Good evening, everybody. I am Tanya Jackson. I am the creator of Nonprofits Get Connected, and I created Nonprofits Get Connected because I am in several groups on Facebook. I've been working in the nonprofit sector for going on 16 years now, and I see a need for small nonprofits or new nonprofits to get that back end information about their back office just as much as they get information about starting their nonprofit and getting their 501c3s. So tonight we're going to be talking about IRS tax statements, the requirements your organization must fulfill in terms of record keeping and some other things. So I'm going to play my intro video and I'll be right back. Okay, we're not going to be on long today. I've had a really long day. Meetings all day. The weather is crappy. And so, I actually was still working my full-time job right before this broadcast. So, I got a few slides for you, and then, I'm just going to give you some ideas or, just off the top of my head, some things that I do or I've done in the past in terms of record keeping and compliance and things like that. So, I'm going to share my screen so you can see my topic for tonight. All right. Nope, that's not it. I'm so glad you guys are patient with me. Eventually, I'll get to a point where this stuff will be so smooth and everything will just happen like it's supposed to. So there we go. So IRS tax statements requirements your organization must fulfill based on record keeping. So all this month, we've been talking about tax receipts and acknowledgments and when to thank your donor, why to thank them, why it's important. This is a vital piece to your success as an organization. And some people don't think of it as, as something that they need to do all the time, but it's better to do them, err on the side of giving a donor acknowledgement letter, even if they didn't ask for it. But there's certain requirements. Most of the information that I use, I get it directly from the IRS. And as I stated last week, the IRS gives you their guidelines, their rules and regulations in order for you to be in compliant with because they're the ones that's issuing you the 501c3 status, the tax exempt status. So they give you the guidelines, how you operate as an organization, as long as you are meeting those guidelines and you're in compliance with the IRS and you're doing what you need to do for your nonprofit, you're okay. But there are times when, like the IRS they're approving hundreds of 501c3 tax exempt status per day. And what happens is, an organization gets that tax exempt status and then they forget that, okay, you got to file a 990 form. Depending on where you are in your organization, sometimes they'll send you a postcard and you just respond to that postcard. But some organizations may have to do a longer 990 form, but it's a requirement. It's an IRS requirement. So, I'm going to pull up my next slide. And let's go to to the next slide, which is, and this always happens to me when I'm trying to get my slides together. So hold on a moment. The next slide is about how long should you keep your records of donations. Let's see. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna get it together, guys. You know, sometimes this takes a little bit of work trying to maneuver all these different things that you're trying to do and, you know, get them on your screen. So, all right. So how long should you keep your records of donations? So typically, if you're a 501c3 public charity, most donor records, I would recommend keeping at least 3 to 5 years, depending on the organization. So you got to check with your finance department. You got to check with your legal department in terms of what, you know, to make sure that you're in compliance. I've even read some places, on some sites on Facebook, when I Google different sites that said up to 7 years. So in my shop, I tend to keep the backup from donations as long as I have, you know, space for them. And I think every few years, the organization may do a sort of like a recycle event or whatever. And so we pack up everything that's old and we take it to our storage. We haven't done that in a couple of years. And so I'm not sure if that's something that we're going to be doing soon but right now I have 3 years of documents at my desk from donor backup and donor receipts. So, or any type of, well, now I work with the grants. So even with that documentation, because those are contracts. So you on the next slide, you'll see the ones that you need to keep permanently. The IRS has a support test. And so in this particular slide, it says, in order to calculate the required public support test on IRS 990. And I wanted to just give you the link to the support test because that's something that you also need to know in terms of your 990 form. And because your 990 forms, that's something that you're going to probably want to keep forever because you never know when you may have to go back and look at what you filed. Basically, that's the tax form for nonprofits. So just like you file your federal taxes and things like that. Now, some people get rid of theirs, some keep theirs forever. I try to keep mine forever because you know the IRS can go back a certain amount of years regarding your tax returns. So it's just best to have that information available to them or available to you, because I've even found myself going back as far as 9-10 years, you know, trying to move forward and figure out what did I file, and you know, because I need to be consistent. So the next slide, the next thing is, what documents should I keep permanently? So there are some documents that, you know, you may want to discard of. You determine that with your organization, but always be able to have some type of backup. Right now, since we're in a technical era, it may be good if you just created a file on your computer, scan those documents into your file, and then you can do away with the paper. But I just always, you know, think that you should have backup, especially in situations like this, you know, scanning them into your computer. You know, your computer is going to be able to contain all of that. And if you ever needed to print those out, you can always print the documents out again. So An organization may choose to set their own guidelines by their financial legal department. There's no set regulations that these are just suggestions. So what I'm saying here is these are suggestions. I don't think that there is according to the IRS, I don't think there's a regulation that says you have to keep these documents permanently. But when you see the list of the documents, you'll kind of understand why. So the first one is donor records and acknowledgement letters. Donor records and acknowledgement letters, that could fall into the 3 to 5 thing. If you scan them, you'll have them forever. The idea of keeping that is, so you have donors who may get audited. And for that reason, they may contact you and say, I gave a donation 3 years ago. I'm being audited. My attorney needs this. I've had this happen in my years of working in nonprofits. I've had this happen where, now here's the thing. I have no obligation to talk to the, the lawyers, but I do have an obligation to talk to that donor, provide them with the documentation that they need. And so the next thing on my list is grant applications and contracts. I would keep that permanently. That's a signed contract. And if you ever had to go to court, hold on a moment, guys. I'm just sending my daughter a message. If you ever had to go to court for anything, contracts are something that you sign. And, some contracts, they can, the statute of limitation is 10 years. So grant applications, you want to keep forever. Based on the grant applications that I look at, what happens in that process, and if you're a grant writer, or you're getting into grant writing, or you're new at it, some grantors, what they'll do is the first thing they'll want is a letter of inquiry, which is basically you just submitting something saying, I'm interested, this is a little bit about my organization. And what they do with those letter of inquiries, they determine if they are going to take you to the next step, which is the grant application. Once you get to that next step and you get the grant application and you complete it, you are documenting in that grant application all the information that they're asking you about about your organization. They're going to ask for your 501c3 letter. They're going to ask for your backup. They're going to ask you about your programs. They're going to ask you they're going to ask for the organization budget as well as the program budget. The difference between the two is the organization budget is a budget that is for the entire organization. The program budget is specific to the program that you're applying for that grant for. So that program budget should match what you're asking in that grant application. So they're going to ask, basically you're going to, that's going to be the next part. Once you have submitted the application and then let's say they award you the grant, yay, you get an award letter. And in the award letter normally spells out basically how they're going to issue your funds, when you should get the funds, and the contact person and things like that. They'll give you that. So let's say you have a multi-year grant. That means that you've applied for an $80,000 grant. You're going to get $40,000 this year. You'll get $40,000 next year. So next year, you can still apply for that grant, but it'll be for that following year. And then so those are multi-year grants where they'll grant you, where their process is to give you half now and half later, or it may be 3 payments or whatever, but they usually detail that in the award letter. The next step is once you get that award letter, then you will get the check will come. And with that check, maybe more documentation. Now you've gotten, let me go back a little bit. Once you get the award letter, there's usually a document that they want you to sign agreeing to the terms of the grant that they're issuing to you. That's the piece that you probably want to keep forever, because normally in some organizations, there's only certain people that can sign these contracts in your organization. You want to limit that. You don't have everyone in your organization, or every, 3 or 4 people. Usually it's the CEO, the COO, and maybe one other person just in case. But usually it's those 2 people, the chief financial officer and the CEO, and the chief operating officer, are ones that can sign contracts. So that's something that you want to keep forever. You can find a place for it. I personally would keep a hard copy of that application, as well as if I wanted to scan it in, I would keep that application. So that's something that you would keep permanently. Annual reports. Now, like the organization I work for is 125 years old. We have annual reports that go back, I'm not sure how many years, but that's a legal, the annual report acts as a legal document in some cases. So for instance, a donor may use that, if in support of the letters that you've given them, if depending on what they're involved in, or depending on if it's the money's coming from a trust or whatever, the report could act as a document for verification, because the organization has listed you or listed that donor in their annual report. So you want to keep your annual reports also as a let's say that you were doing, like right now we're doing our 125th. This year is our 125th anniversary. So those annual reports become really important as you see through the years how long a person's been giving to you, and what level they've been giving at. That acts as another piece to do that. So board meeting notes and committee meeting notes. And I spelled meeting wrong. I left out an E. Oh, well. Okay. Board meeting notes and committee meeting notes are very important, because you want to be able to go back and keep those records. Those also can act as legal documents for your organization, because what happens is, when you are filing your taxes, or you are reporting your progress, or you're reporting out, some organizations, not necessarily funding organizations, but even some contracts, like if you get government contracts and things like that, some of them want to have your board meeting notes. I've done a grant before where they actually wanted the board meeting notes. And in those board meeting notes, it's very detailed. You have to have a secretary that record those notes every board meeting you have, because that acts as a legal document too, if there were ever issues with a board member and things like that. So you want to keep that document permanently. Articles of incorporation and bylaws, forever. That's a permanent document you want to keep forever. And that's not just in nonprofits. That's even in your if you have a for-profit business, or you have a anytime you file for anything like this and you incorporate, you want to keep that forever. That's not something that, okay, after 3 years, I'll get rid of it, because this is what you use to establish your nonprofit. Because in the nonprofit process, and I think in January or February, I think I'm going to be going over how to start a nonprofit. I think I said that last week, but I'm going to think about doing that and taking you through the steps of that. But the articles of incorporation and the bylaws. Now, the bylaws you want to keep, because your articles of incorporation stay the same. Or in some cases, like I've done this before, I had to change the name of my nonprofit organization. So I changed it from one name to the other. So I had to do a form to send into the state and ask for that change. I had to pay for it, but I had to ask for that change. What happens with your bylaws is you may also change your bylaws based on the changes in your organization. Like, you may change to signers. There may be, I think I brought up previously a situation where in your bylaws, you may want to put something in your bylaws that protects you as the founder of your organization, that'll protect you from being voted out. But you got to talk to a nonprofit attorney that knows how to do that. Make sure it's worded right, because a lot of people worry about that and I think it also deters a lot of people from building their boards because of the fear they have if it's not family members or friends or someone that knows them. They have a fear of adding those board members because they feel they'll lose control and then that person could vote them out. But you got to have people you trust on your board, but you still have to, you can change your bylaw. You want to keep every changes you make, you want to keep the old one, you want to keep the new one. So you want to keep that permanently also. Board policies and resolutions. And these are things that you want to, like board policies, do you have them? Because some people will do the bylaws and they won't do the policies, two different things. And I have yet to see a copy of board policies. I've seen bylaws and things like that, but some of these things, and even the resolution, some of these things, they're not just, they're just not passed around the organization where everyone can see them. But it's something that you might want to look into and come up with your board policies. Like, for instance, one policy that I know has been consistent with the organizations that I work with, what has been consistent is a give-get, and requiring boards to, so you can have an act that actually acts money, and then you can have a board that people that just want to be on your board. You want to have a board that's going to help you raise money. So what some organizations will do, they'll establish a give-get. The give means these are donations that they have given out of their own funds, that they gave the money, they made the donation. Get is when they've solicited other people and got them to give donations or buy a ticket to the event or something like that. So you establish what that amount is. Some smaller organizations may start out at $1,000 a year. Larger organizations who actually get board members that, have the capacity, the financial capacity to give more, may establish a $10,000 a year. Now, here's how it could happen. You can have a board member that satisfies their $1,000, but maybe they didn't reach their $9,000 in their get. They can decide to give more to make up for that loss. That's if you write it in your policy like that, in your board policies, that they are allowed to do that. Most times you're not going to say, no, I need to make sure that you give $1,000 and that you go get $9,000. Most times, you're lenient with that piece because they are bringing in the funds. But it depends on the capacity of the financial capacity of your board members, if they are able to do this. If you're just starting out and you're small, you may set something like $500 for the first year, and see how that goes. And then each year, the next year, you can really determine if your board members are really engaged, if they really want to be a part. And the other thing in your bylaws, you can write your terms. Like some organizations have bylaws that state a board member can only serve 2 3-year terms. So they can, the first term is for 3 years, and then they could serve another 3 years. And then maybe they have to take a year off, and then they could come back to the board and serve another 3 years. That's how you get long-term board members. Some bylaws will state that board members have to renew every year. That could be, it depends. When you're first starting out, that might be good because you get a feel for your board members. You get a feel for the ones who are really engaged, the ones that really want to work with your organization. So starting out, you may want to do something like that, and always have an attorney look over that, a nonprofit attorney that understands that. And then the IRS application for tax exempt status, the Form 23. That's the application that you're using to file your tax, for your tax exempt status. Keep that. Just create a file of all these things. And there's some more things that you should keep permanently. You can always check the IRS. You can always go on Google, and there's foundations out there that keep track of this type of information. You could check with the AFP. You could check with I think it's AASP, Advancement Association for Advancement Professionals. You could check with different organizations that keep this type of information. Okay, and then your IRS determination letter. That's the letter that you get saying, congratulations, we've determined that you are tax exempt. And from that point, any donation that you get, it's tax exempt it's tax deductible to the donor, and you are tax exempt from paying taxes. And here's the thing about this letter. This letter has your tax ID number, your EIN number, employer identification number on it. Some people don't understand that EIN number is not your Social Security number. It's public information. You want to put that on your donor letters. You want donors to have that information. You also use this number when you are applying for grants. You use it for bank accounts. You use it for everything, but it's not, you don't have to protect it like you protect your Social Security number. You might want to put it at the bottom of your website. You may want to put it on the bottom of your tax letters when you send them out. I try to be totally transparent with that, with my tax number. It's on my website, letters that I sent out, because what you want people to be able to do is first find you as a tax exempt organization, because remember and understand, a nonprofit organization is not owned by one person. It's a public entity, and it belongs to the community. What you have done is you've created an organization that's going to serve whatever community that you're trying to serve. And so because you're getting public money, you're getting grants, you're getting donors to donate, things like that, they can go and find this information. It's public information. They can search your 990 form and find out how much money you made for the year. How much did you get in donations? How much did you get in federal grants, state grants? How much did you get in private grants? What your salaries are? It'll list your board members. It'll list all of that. It'll list your C-suite, your CFOs, CEOs. It lists their salaries. That's public information. So that's a letter that you want to keep. You might want, put one, file somewhere, have one on your website. Have one in your, on a file in your computer, but you might want to even make several copies of it, because every time you apply for a grant, you got to put one in there. If you apply for in-kind, they're going to ask for your your IRS tax letter. Whatever you're applying for, whatever you're trying to get, I just make copies. So if someone's asking for it, I just give it to them. It's not like you got to protect it and, oh my God, I don't want them to have my EIN number. And and then state sales tax and exempt letter. Same thing, basically. Just as you get a tax letter, an IRS determination letter from the IRS, you go to your state so that you're tax exempt. You're on state taxes. So basically, when you're buying items for your organization, you shouldn't be paying tax, but that's a separate application. Your IRS determination letter does not cover your state taxes. So you got to go to the state and apply for state tax exemption, so you can purchase things for your organization. Also, that's another letter that's public. Be careful about handing it out to a bunch of people because people will use it. But if it's someone in your organization and they are, you're doing an event and they're shopping for your event or things like that, you give them the letter to take to the store. Some stores will allow you to register with them. Once you're registered with them, you don't have to keep bringing the letter. I think it's like the big stores like Staples. You can register your sales tax with them. And then when you go in, you just tell them what organization you're from, and it'll already be in their system. So you don't have to bring in a letter every time you come. All right, electronic receipts. So electronic receipts are receipts that, so I make a donation and online. And once I make that donation, I get what is called a receipt. Now, what you have to do is decide if you want the IRS statement to go on the receipt the donor receives when they make an online donation. Here's my thought on that. So I'm giving the donor a tax acknowledgement letter that I'm going to send out, right? The electronic receipt they're going to get at the time that they make that online donation. You have to decide, where do you want to put that tax language, that IRS tax language that we talked about, the no goods and services were given. When you have to decide which letter which one you're going on, what happens. And I've had this happen before previously when events came around. You have a email confirmation, which is this, it's an electronic receipt. You have that, and then you have the acknowledgement letter that you're going to send after the event. And then let's say you have an event software that you're working with, or your software that you're working with, and a donor calls and says, hey, I need a receipt for my donation that I made at the event on Friday night or Thursday night. And can you send me that? Well, in your event software, you may have the option to just go in and click and send, their email is already in there, and send them a receipt. So now if you have that tax language on all three letters, all three pieces of documentation, you've given that donor 3 tax receipts for 1 donation. So you have to figure out, do I want to put, which letter do I want on? I always put it on the letter that my organization writes. Okay. The tax receipt is just that. So if I make a donation and then right after that donation, I get what I call a confirmation of my donation. It'll have the information that's needed on there. I call that a tax receipt. The acknowledgement letter that I'm going to be sending out, that's going to have a thank you for your donation or whatever. Thank you for, giving to our organization. You've done, your donation will allow us to do A, B, C, D. And at the bottom, it has the donation information. And then it has that IRS statement. That's the letter that they're going to use to file their taxes. So if you put it on the other documents that I listed, they can also use that. And I'm not saying, don't say I said it, but I'm not saying Anyone's going to be dishonest and do that. But when you're just thinking about being ethical from your standpoint as an organization, it's just the proper thing to do to determine that from your organization. That should not be something that the donor has to figure out. Well, I got 3 tax receipts with tax language on it. Which one is the real one? Which is the one I use for my to file my taxes? All right. And on the electronic receipts, you want to make sure that it still has the donation amount, the gift date, what the donation is for. And that could be something that is default. So if you know that it's an event, in most software, you can go in and put the name of the event. If it's the portal, if it's the link that goes to the general donations, you can preset it to say general donation. So that needs to be on the letter. That's something that the IRS wants to see. You want to have the EIN number. That's an added bonus. No, it's not a bonus. That's something that you want to add. Okay, because in some cases donors will come back and ask you for it. It's like I said, it's not your social security number. It's no one's social security number. You can give it out. It's not a problem. Mailing address of the organization, and you always want to put in every email confirmation that you do to be in compliance. Every email that you send out, you want to have either an email for support. So who do I contact if I have an issue? You also want to have a way for them to opt out of emails. You always have to have that in your emails, a way for people to opt out, especially like if they're subscribing to your email list or things like that. You always have to give them a way to opt out, and that should be in your email. If the tax language is not included, let them know they will receive a tax receipt at a later date. So what's important here is the tax receipt. In somewhere, if you're not going to put the tax language in the electronic receipt, make sure you put a small note in there that says you will receive a letter after the event, or you will receive a letter within the next few days or things like that, because they may be thinking that that's their tax receipt. And if they take it to their tax accountant, the tax accountant is going to say, this letter, I can't use this letter for your taxes. So that is it for tonight on the record keeping for acknowledgments, for tax receipts and acknowledgments, and other documentation. I hope this information is helpful to you all. Video will be saved. It's on my YouTube page, as well as it'll be saved on the page. So you can always go back and review them for as long as I'm not going to remove them, for as long as Facebook will allow them to stay up. I will leave them up there. If you want copies of if you want some copies of the slides, you can email me. And here's the email address that you email me at. You can email me at nonprofitsgetconnected@gmail.com. If you have questions, if you are searching for some information, or you're even back in September when we talked about your donor database and things like that, questions about that, you can reach out to me. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Zend of acknowledgement letters. And this is sort of like personalizing your letters. So we'll be talking about that next week, the effect that it has on your donor, when you should do it, how you should do it. We'll be talking about that next week. So as I stated, I'm Tanya Jackson. I hope that this information was valuable to you, and I hope that your nonprofit is going well, and things you're getting grants. I know that there's a lot. It's amazing because, even through this pandemic, things shut down and turn, a lot of organizations, they slowed down on funding and giving grants and things like that. Basically, I guess, to see where they would be or where they were at. But it's been amazing how many grantors are now beginning to open up and give funds. And I think one of the things that's happening also with that is some organizations. So just like your nonprofit organization is, hold on a moment. Just like your nonprofit organization is looking for funding. These foundations that grant money, they also have to report what they've given, what they've, who they funded. So basically every year when they do a budget, they have to determine how much money they're going to fund out to other organizations. They also have a responsibility to report that they've, given this money out. So what happens is, I think with some organizations now, they've got this reserve of money that they put aside to fund organizations. So a lot of them now, what they're doing is, because they know that with COVID, a lot of organizations have had to pivot and change the way that they're running their programs. And so some organizations are now saying, okay, we know that there's a certain guideline and criteria for you to receive this grant. However, if you need to use this grant for general operating, we are good with that. We're okay with that. Some grantors are doing that. So that's why you got to read your contracts. And sometimes they'll, like the ones I'm working with, they'll send me an email and let me know that, we know that COVID has hit and things were shut down. If you need to use these funds for other purposes, then you can. But don't take that lightly, because you still need to report back to them how you use that money. They're still going to want a report of how you use that money. So you can't just run off willy-nilly and use the funds, but you may be able to use it for general operating, but you still got to have a report that fulfills that general operating. So I want to say thank you to everyone. And I want to say good night, and I will see you next week.